I'm pleased to introduce this morning my friend, Dr. Helen Sterk, Professor of Communication Arts and Sciences at Calvin College. Helen and I go back a ways. We were once on a committee to write a book. I mean, what's wrong with that phrase? A committee to write a book. And neither of us actually ended up writing for this book, and so Helen and I, over the years, have been bonded by this failure. But failure has not marked Helen's writing life. She received her PhD from the University of Iowa in rhetorical studies and has co-authored a book recently, Gender, Culture, and Physicality, Paradoxes and Taboos. And she's written many other articles and books. She's also speaking tonight for an Erasmus lecture that I invite you to. 7 o'clock in Hieronymus Lounge, and her topic is Gender Partnership, a Care Theory Perspective. Hope to see you there. Helen Sterk is a serious scholar, and dare I say it, of great mirth. She has suffered significantly, but she is a person of deep faith. She is an excellent thinker who, as she would put it, knows how to rock and roll. Please welcome Helen Sterk.
Thank you. I wondered if he was going to say rock and roll. That was kind of our, theme song for getting going on that failed book. As you see, it served us well. Well, today I'd like to talk to you about the book of Esther. And I don't know what you think about Esther. When I was a kid and we studied her in Vacation Bible School and Sunday school, I thought, man, she's just a Barbie, She's beautiful. And I thought, she's just beautiful. There's nothing else going on. And since I was a kid, I've been reading a little bit, and I read a lot of stuff about what different people think about Esther. Christian feminists kind of think Esther is passive, subservient. They think that Vashti is a little bit more of a tough person saying no to the man, okay? So there's that. Traditionalists like Esther because she's a subservient wife and daughter. Now, there's some biblical scholars who say, why on earth is Esther's story even in the Bible? It's one of the, I think it's the only, might be the only, maybe James, one of the only books in the Bible where the name of God is never spoken. God's name is never in the book of Esther. So people say, what on earth is that book doing in the Bible? What's its message? If it is so ambiguous, so able to be distorted, why is it there? Why was it chosen to be in the biblical canon? Well, recently I've come to be of the opinion, and this is the first time I've floated this idea, so we'll see how well it goes. I've come to be of the opinion that it's there to put flesh and blood, skin and bone on Genesis 1, 27 and 28, the first story of the creation that's told to us. It goes like this. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. As a gender scholar and as a Christian feminist, I see the story of Esther and Mordecai as a vivid example of how women and men can share dominion in God's world. For me, Christian feminism means seeing women and men as sharing in the image of God. It means seeing women and men as sharing in the exercise of dominion, responsible stewardship over the earth, over all of the earth. I don't agree with the recent article in The Atlantic in the June and July and August issue, written by Hannah Rosen, where she says, it's the end of men. Women have taken over the world. I don't agree with that. I don't think that there has ever been a time when it was more important for women and men to partner together as it is now in the running of the world, not just in the running of the home. You know, and as I studied for this chapel, I tried to think of another pairing of a powerful woman and a powerful man who are not husband and wife in the Bible. And I couldn't find another one. So if you can, I would love to hear about it. Anyway, let's take a look at this story of gender partnership. Okay, so the story begins with a grand party. Xerxes, king of the world, throws a grand party for thousands of his closest friends to show his power and his wealth. You know, the depictions of that party setting are worthy of HGTV. In chapter 1, it says there were white cotton curtains and blue hangings tied with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rings and marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and colored stones. Drinks were served in golden goblets, goblets of different kinds, and the royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king. Now, Xerxes ruled all the way from India to Ethiopia. It's 2,400 miles. I mean, roughly what it is between here and New York. It's a huge, huge empire. Its capital was Susa, where Daniel and later Nehemiah also served. He gave a half-year celebration of his wealth, which ended in a 7-day party where drinking heavily was the deal. Little detail, different golden goblets, not mass-produced, not a lot that they were the same, different golden goblets, each one handmade, and they were not made in any kind of a mass-produced, efficient way. The wealth was out there. And on the 7th day, the queen, Vashti, was ordered to appear, wearing the royal crown, and most likely, nothing else. And she said, you know, no, I don't think I want to do that. I'm not going to do that. And she said, no. Well, that just threw everybody in an uproar. The king's advisors said, you know what? If your wife can do this to you, our wives will do this to us. You can't let this go. So they put out a big royal decree. They sent it out to all of the districts of this 2,400-mile kingdom, that all women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. They sent out a declaration that every man was going to be master in his own house. Well, Vashti disappeared. She was gone. We don't know exactly what happened to her. And the king needed a new wife, a new queen, preferably somebody who was a little more pliable. All right, so enter Esther. What Xerxes did is he said to all of the people who were leading all the provinces, he said, find the most beautiful young virgins and send them to me, and I'm going to choose. So who knows how many beautiful young virgins showed up, but a lot of them showed up. Who knows if they were just kidnapped, just taken? Did they have any choice? No. Well, Esther was one of those virgins. Now, Esther was not one of the 7 families that queens usually came from in that culture. She was an outsider. She had a cousin, Mordecai, sometimes called her uncle, cousin uncle, but he adopted her when her mom and dad died. Well, she had to leave Mordecai. So what happened is Esther was placed under the control of Haggai in a harem. He was one of the king's eunuchs. Now, he liked her. I mean, the verse says she pleased him and won his favor. I mean, we don't know what she did, but she seems to be a nice person who sort of went up to people and said, hi, how you doing? What's it like to be a eunuch? Can we talk? He promoted her to first place among all these virgins. Well, there was 1 year of beauty treatments. There was 6 months of oil of myrrh, 6 months of perfumes and cosmetics. At the end of that, I'm telling you, women, she was soft and really smelled good and looked great. Well, each girl who was in that harem was told that she should bring with her an item when she went to see the king. So the king, kind of like Scheherazade and, the 1001 Nights, the king had a virgin come into him every night. Who knows what they did? Well, there you are. And then would go away. In the morning, he never found one he liked until Esther came. Now, Esther said to Haggai, she said, well, what do you think I should bring? What should I bring into the king? And he gave her something. I wish they would have said what. They don't. He gave her something. She took it with her into the king. Well, the king liked her. And the king said, done. We've got our queen. This is all good. Well, Esther married the king. And her cousin, her adopted father, Mordecai, said, you should keep your Jewish background secret. Don't tell anybody. Very shortly after the wedding, through Esther, Mordecai warned the king of a threat to his life. And the two conspirators were caught and hanged. Mordecai's act was transcribed in the annals of the kingdom. And this says to me that Mordecai and Esther took care of each other. Mordecai gave her advice, and Esther used the power of her position to communicate with the king. Well, at this point in the story, along comes a new guy. His name is Haman. And for some reason, which is not named, he's promoted until he's very close to the king. His people were Amalekites, who were mortal enemies of the Jews, stemming from King Saul's time. And so there was enmity between the Jews and between the Amalekites. Well, Haman thought he was a pretty big gun. So what he did is he said, look, when I'm out and about, I want people to bow to me. As I walk by, just fall down on your face. It's a good thing. And Mordecai was the only one who would not do it. Well, Haman was furious. He learned of Mordecai being a Jew, and he thought, okay, doke, we're going to kill all the Jews. Not just Mordecai, all the Jews. We're going to kill them all. So what he did is he cast lots. He cast a kind of stones. I don't know if they're like dominoes or exactly what they look like, but they're called pur, P-U-R. They cast a kind of stones to find the best day to kill all the Jews. It came up a year later, which I think is God working. They had a year. They had a year before all the Jews were going to be killed. So Haman conned the king into letting him kill an entire unnamed people, presenting them as a danger to the king. And he gave the king money. And the king, in return, signed and sealed this decree with his ring and then gave his signet ring to Haman, which is an immense power piece because you can do whatever you want when you have the signet ring. Well, Mordecai went into mourning along with the rest of the Jews, sackcloth, ashes at the door of the palace. So Esther's maids went out to find out what was up, and she sent her eunuch, she had one of her own by then, Hathach, to bring clothes to Mordecai, who refused them. And Mordecai, through Hathach, gave a copy of the decree and a charge for Esther. You go see the king. You intercede. Now notice who surrounded Esther, who she relied on, her maids and Hathach, her eunuch. She trusted them to keep her informed of the actions of her adopted father and to help her take care of him. Well, Esther did not want to do this. She did not want to do what Mordecai said because she ran the risk of being killed. If she went into the king and approached him and he didn't hold out his scepter to her, she could be killed. She didn't like that a lot. Mordecai came to her very strongly in his words, "Don't think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than other Jews. For if you keep silence at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter, but you and your father's family will perish. Who knows? Maybe you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this." This is if not the crucial turning point in the story. Esther wants to hide. She wants to play it safe. She wants to avoid those risks of leadership that are being put before her. Mordecai, who knows what her skills and gifts are, will not let her off the hook. This is not something he can do. Only she can do it because she is the one who has the position. All he can do is help her do what only she can do. As a Jewish woman, she was raised to be deferential, not presumptuous. Speaking up was the last thing that she preferred to do. All right, so she gave in. And she asked Mordecai and the Jews, and she also asked her maids to fast for her for 3 days and nights, and she did the same. And then she said, "And after that, I will go to the king. And if I die, I die." Now, that's the closest the book of Esther comes to naming God, because fasting usually goes along with praying. But the key point here is she did not act precipitously. She implicates Mordecai in the preparation work that needs to be done before she goes to the king. She needs his support, she asks for it. She needs her maid's support, she asks for it. And when the time comes to take that big leap, she's ready for the consequences. And to me, this is an excellent example of either female or male leaders to seek counsel and prayer support before they go ahead and do a big thing. All right, so Esther goes in to the king. He extends the scepter. She doesn't die, which is a good thing. And she invites him and Haman to dinner. And so they come to dinner. They came to dinner, and she said, "Hey, why don't you come back tomorrow night?" Which is weird. She didn't say anything. She just, did she chicken out? Well, I don't know. It's just weird. She invited them back the second night. I would say, as a Calvinist, it was providential that God had a plan for that day in between. He had a plan. Two very big things happened between the first banquet and the second one. First, Haman goes home, talks to his wife and his friends, and goes, oh man, the king loves me. It's just great. The queen is having a dinner just for me and the king. Things are all really, really good. And his wife and friends said to him, hey, you know what? As long as the king likes you so much, let's really get rid of Mordecai in a big way. Let's put up a 7-story tall gallows. A structure 7 stories tall. Now, this is like the world's fastest building of a 7-story tall structure because it happens in like a day. I don't quite get that, but it does. So the gallows is built. Well, meanwhile, back at the palace, the king couldn't sleep. So he wakes up and he goes, darn it, what shall we do? Why don't you read me those annals? So he has some eunuchs read him the annals. He was reminded of Mordecai telling him about the threat in his life, and he goes, I never rewarded the guy. What should we do? All right, so the next morning, king's walking around. Haman shows up, ready to say, hey, let's hang Mordecai. So Haman is there. And the king says to Haman, he says, what should the king do to the man the king wants to bless? And Haman goes, that's me. I think it's me. So he says, you know what I think you should do? You should have someone put a robe that the king has worn on this person. You should put him on a horse that you have ridden, and you should have the royal crest on that horse. That's a great idea. And so the king says, whoop, good, why don't you do that to Mordecai? And Haman's gone, ooh, not so good. So he did it. He dressed up Mordecai. He paraded him through, and he went home. And his wife and friends said, oh, you're in trouble. He said, Mordecai, before whom your downfall has begun, he's of the Jewish people. You are not going to prevail against him. You will surely fall. Now, his advisors could see what's coming down the road for him. It doesn't seem they see consequences beyond their own noses, though. While Esther and Mordecai realized that the threat of death extended through their whole family, Haman's wife and friends thought only Haman was in deep trouble. They did not operate with him out of partnership. In good times, he got the praise, and in bad times, he was going to take the fall. They were not partnering with him. They were just participating with him in his power. And the book of Esther presents Haman as the sole architect of his and his son's destruction. Well, before Haman and his wife can figure out a way to get Haman out of town, up pop the eunuchs. They take Haman to the second dinner, and the king says to Esther, what do you want? And she says, hey, I'm going to tell you, my people and I have been sold to be destroyed, to be killed, to be annihilated. If we'd been sold only as slaves, I would have held my peace, but no enemy can compensate for this damage to the king. And the king says, oh no, this is terrible. Who came up with that idea? Esther goes, a foreign enemy, the wicked Haman. Well, you can only imagine Haman. I mean, he thinks he was being praised, not so much, really. Maybe she pointed her finger, I don't know. But all attention turns to him. Haman sees his life shattering around him. The king is furious, and he's so mad, he goes out into the garden. He's like thrashing around, walking around. Well, he comes back into the room to find Haman lying on top of Esther. Not such a good plan, Haman. What he seemed to be doing was asking Esther for mercy. Well, the king didn't really think he was asking for mercy, so he calls in, guess who? The eunuchs, and they come on in. They cover his face because it's pretty clear this guy's not long for this world. And then one of the eunuchs says, "Hey, there's this high gallows out there that Haman made for Mordecai. Why don't we hang Haman on it instead?" Now, as you can tell, I'm kind of fascinated by the eunuchs. They're interesting. Don't you think they're interesting? I think they could be the focus of the analysis of the story themselves. Servants are meant to be offstage. They're meant to do the support work for the principals. But here, they are the key instruments of information, of game change. They are named. Haggai tells Esther what to bring into the king on her audition night. Bigthan and Teresh threaten the king's life. Hathach communicates between Esther and Mordecai. And Harbona reminds the king of the existence of a very high public gallows. Now, it intrigues me that this story has a very wide range of key players. The queen, her cousin, maids, eunuchs. All of them were very active participants. The king alone seems passive, just caught up in events just beyond his control. Okay, so usually in Sunday school, this is where things would end. You know, oh, there you are. Esther and Mordecai is safe. Haman gets his just rewards. Everything's good. that is not where the story really ends, because the king takes his signet ring off of Haman, gives it to Mordecai. He gives the house of Haman to Esther, and Esther set Mordecai over Haman's house. Okay, so Mordecai is raised to the right hand of the king, where Haman used to be. Esther asks the king to get rid of the decree, to revoke the decree, and he could not. I mean, once it was in law, it was in law. But he did give to Mordecai and Esther, to the two of them together, the authority to figure out a go-around. Okay, so they did. Strategized together the best way to counteract it. They sent out a new decree that allowed the Jews to defend themselves, to get rid of attackers and their families, and to take all their goods on the day that Haman had set for them to be destroyed. Well, the Jews were thrilled. They didn't need to just stand there and take it. They could do something about it. And other people actually go, hey, I'm a Jew. They're pretending to be Jews because they didn't want to be, killed. All right, the day came, the Jews defended themselves, but they did not take the goods. They did not take the plunder of people. The king gave Esther the right to decide what to do with the enemies of the Jews, and she asked for another day of defense, and she also asked for the hanging of the 10 sons of Haman. So his family suffered big time for what he did. Well, after all was said and done, Mordecai sent out a second decree to the Jews, telling them to celebrate this holiday every year by giving presents to the poor and sharing food with each other. It says, Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with the Jew Mordecai, gave full written authority, the two of them, full written authority, confirming the second letter about Purim. The command of Queen Esther fixed these practices of Purim, and it was recorded in writing. Well, today, Purim is kind of the Jewish carnival. It's a day on which the consumption of alcohol is traditionally encouraged, and the prohibitions against cross-dressing are removed amid the revelry that celebrates the heroes of the story. In the book of Esther, the whole little last chapter is about Mordecai. It says, for Mordecai the Jew was next in rank to Xerxes. He was powerful among the Jews, popular with his many kindred, for he sought the good of his people and interceded for the welfare of his descendants. What a story. How come there's not a movie of this? Especially the great ironic reversal of Haman and Mordecai. I think this is wonderful. And as a Christian feminist, I take deep affirmation from the presence of the book of Esther in the biblical canon. Along with the literary theorist Northrop Frye, I take the Bible as the great code. In it, God reveals who God is, who humans are, and how humans should relate to God and to themselves. If the consistent and deep story of the Bible for gendered human relationships was that patriarchy and masculine power and domination were the truth, were all there was, we'd be very hard-pressed to see the Bible as good news for women. And you know what? We would be very hard-pressed to see the Bible as good news for men. Because if men cannot share the burdens of leadership in the world, it means they have to carry them all. God meant us to carry them together. As the book of Esther shows, God made women and men to live in partnership in the world. They're not just marriage partners, but they're also side to side, shoulder to shoulder, world partners, as were Mordecai and Esther. They both held power, Mordecai as her elder and adopted father, and Esther as queen of a vast kingdom. And together, they shared power for the greater good of all. All right, there's probably other lessons in the book of Esther, but this is a lesson in the book of Esther for me, and I hope that you see it too. As we serve God, we as women and men, brothers and sisters in Christ, share the good and hard work of dominion in God's world, seeking God's kingdom, as we sang about. And really, isn't this very good news for all of us? Would you please join me in prayer? Dear God, thank you so much for the stories in the Bible, for the stories that give us a little bit of a glimpse into your thinking about who we are to be with one another and in relation to one another. We pray, Lord, that you will help us to see all the creative, nuanced, and varied ways that we can partner together, women and men, in your kingdom to do your work in the world. All this I ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Helen.